This is the vlog for June 20th. June 20th, 2018. This is probably the hottest day of the year. It got up to 90 degrees today. And on top of being very hot, it was hazy, humid, and mostly disgusting. I do not deal with heat particularly well. I live in a house with no air conditioning, and getting a portable air conditioning device for my room is high on my list of priorities once I get back to work in a couple of weeks. Until then, I'm going to stew in my own juices quite a bit. Now that we've gotten the nastiness out of the way, it is my pleasure to announce that my sister, who is pregnant, will be having a girl. And I couldn't be more thrilled. I was actually hoping for a girl. I think my sister, how do I put this? I remember when Anna was doing one of these things where they give you a doll at school that behaves. Well, obviously it's not a robot, it's just a doll, but it has a little microchip machine, whatever you want to call it, inside, so that it will cry at specific intervals, and you have to do a thing that basically counts as feeding, or change its diaper, or do a couple other things, all of which take time, and it is programmed to go off in the middle of the night at odd hours of the day, and it keeps track of how long it takes the student to react to these behaviors, and you get graded on how good a mother you are. And it must have been 20 years ago that she went through all that, and now she's actually going to have to do it. But she put in so much effort. She really wanted to do a good job, and she's a teacher. She works with kids. I know that she's going to be great, and I can't wait to meet my little niece. I don't know if I've said this before. Well, the one weird vlog of these where I was saying all this stuff and I didn't even go to check whether or not I had sound. So I uploaded a video with no sound in it. And that was the one where I announced that my sister was pregnant to the world. Figures. So I'm going to check this one to make sure that it has sound. She's not talking about the names she's considering. She wants to keep that to herself until the baby is born. And it's still going to be, let's see here. If the baby is due in November, we've still got 5 months left, I guess, before she is going to be born, which gives her a lot of time to consider. I know what I would recommend, but I'm going to keep that to myself because it's really not my business. So whatever. Yeah, it was just, it was really funny, because when I was talking to my parents, they're the ones that let me know all this. They were just, my sister came home and told us way before we were allowed to tell anybody else. And they had already been sort of made aware, and I was the last person at the table to find out, and they were sort of like wondering if they should even bother telling me. And then my dad pointed out that I was clever enough that I'd figure it out regardless, especially since Anna was not having any alcohol with dinner, which was a little unusual. She's quite fond of wine, especially when she's on vacation. So she explained the situation and swore me to secrecy. But this time I basically found out at roughly the same time my folks did. So they were, this is what's happening, and then I got to see the excitement, and I was excited too. And that's wonderful. That's the moments that life is made of and what makes life worth living. Oh, God. This heat, though, I am just going to melt. I didn't walk today. I didn't get up and go for a walk. This haze is just, it's so miserable to be out in. When I went out and got lunch, it was just, for those of you in humid climes, you know what it's like to walk outside and feel like your clothes have sucked onto your skin and you're now wearing a wet coat, practically. It's not good. But my day has been spent indoors. And I've made it worse for myself by playing a lot of video games and using my computer, which gets very, very warm. But, yeah. What else have I found out? So, Gundam is the big game this week. That's going to be coming out. I'm going to be playing that at least a bit. In October, a much bigger game for me is coming out. And I'm going to talk briefly about this now. Hopefully not going too long. But Soul Calibur 6 is coming out. And that's kind of a big deal for a couple of reasons. First of all, I thought the franchise was dead. And this is my favorite fighting game franchise. It's the only fighting game that I am respectably good at. I can compete at a very low competitive level, but I can compete at that level. And the third game came out for the PlayStation 2, so like 15 years ago. And it had several severe flaws. But it did have one interesting feature that a lot of people latched onto, and that was the Create a Soul mode, or character creator, where you get to make your own fighter. You give them a very distinct look, you dress them in clothing options that you collect through gameplay, you pick a voice that has a certain personality, that they say lines while they're fighting, and it's your character. And I've always been a huge proponent of being able to make your own character, or at least alter the main character to suit you in games like Mass Effect, where it's important the main character be named Shepard so that they can be identified, but that's always their last name. Their first name can be just about anything. And you can make Shepard a man or a woman. You can change Shepard's skin, hair, eyes. You can sort of change their build a little bit. I think it got better in later games. And that's important. I feel like in some ways it held back the Witcher series, because it's always Geralt, and Geralt's a very specific character. Speaking of Geralt, he's actually going to be in Soul Calibur 6 as a cross-promotion. But I know a lot of people that are uninterested in playing Geralt because he's so stereotypically the badass hero. And they want somebody that, maybe can grow as a character and doesn't already have a whole bunch of backstory from a bunch of novels. They want to make a character that's their own character, and they want to have ownership of that character. So the fact that they just recently revealed that Soul Calibur 6 has a character creator is a big deal. A lot of people speculated that that would be a feature cut. They were moving, after Soul Calibur 3, which was not great, they made Soul Calibur 4 and Soul Calibur 5. Soul Calibur 4 was the first game with online functionality. That also didn't work particularly well. But Namco are really good at learning from their mistakes, and that studio especially really picked up what was working and what wasn't, and focused on those things. So Soul Calibur 5 was a phenomenal game. It played faster than Soul Calibur 4. It had more of that old feeling that you got from Soul Calibur 2, which is largely considered the high point in the series. And none of that mattered, because Soul Calibur 4 had been so poorly received, with its much slower, methodical combat that focused on stun combos, leaving opponents on the receiving end with very little options of getting out of them. I've personally watched my life bar whittle away to only 30% remaining health from one combo. At which point I tried to get up and they did the exact same combo again and killed me. That's not fun. You need to have options of getting out of stuff like that. A 9-hit combo is very impressive when you get it to go, but if you're trying to make a game popular and you want people to keep playing it, you want people to feel like they have a chance. um, even if they don't. And, sometimes people get that aspect completely wrong. You can look at Super Smash Bros. Brawl's famous tripping mechanic, where characters who are in the lead are more likely to suddenly fall on their face, which theoretically gives the opponent an advantage. But most opponents never were able to capitalize on that feature, and even if they did, you don't want to feel like you only won because of random chance. You want to feel like you have done something to earn the win because you've gotten better at the game from practice. This goes for everything in life. People, think that, when luck's on their side, that's great, but let's try and remove luck from more situations and make things happen the way we want them to happen, the way they should happen. So, Soul Calibur 5 got rid of those stun combos, but the damage was already done. The the way the hardcore competitive community received the game was sort of this is more the same. They cut a lot of characters from Soul Calibur 5's roster, including, oddly, most of the Korean characters, which seems oddly specific. There were only two main Korean characters, but they removed both of them because both of them technically have derivative weapon styles from two other characters. Still, I think it would have been better off for them to, at least have some Korean character, maybe with a new weapon, come in to sort of fill that void. Instead, we got a couple of weird European characters with magic powers that felt sort of out of place in the Soul Calibur roster. I mean, we have weird characters like Yoshimitsu and Cervantes, but Viola and Zwei were way, way weirder. So, Soul Calibur 5 ended up being not financially successful, to my knowledge, and the game that followed was a free-to-play PlayStation exclusive with no multiplayer. So imagine how well that went. But at that point, I was thinking, okay, this is it for Soul Calibur. They're just going to stop making these games. Writing's on the wall. People don't like what they've been doing for like 3 whole games, so they're just going to quit. Maybe they'll include the characters in some other franchise or something. I don't know. So imagine my surprise when early this year, Soul Calibur 6 gets mentioned, and suddenly there's a trailer. Suddenly there's many trailers revealing a whole bunch of different characters. The timeline seems completely off because it's not set after Soul Calibur 5. It's set during the time of Soul Calibur 1 and 2, and even some of the events of the preceding game, Soul Edge or Soul Blade, if you're in Japan. Actually, I can't remember if it was Soul Blade in America or Soul Blade in Japan, but it was called Soul Edge in one country and Soul Blade in another. And then Soul Calibur was the name they used for all the subsequent games. So, it's getting back to its roots. It's featuring mostly characters that were in the first 2 games. Still no sign of any Koreans, to my knowledge, which is still troublesome. But they've made sort of the game the focus, so the fact that they're also including the character creator means that they do recognize that there are certain things that maybe don't appeal at a competitive level, but sell the game and make it popular and get people to buy it and pick up and play it, because most people don't play fighting games competitively. If they play fighting games, they play them for a month or 2 because they're fun, and then they move on to something else, like all games. It is a very small percentage of the crowd that is picking up a game series and playing it almost to the exclusion of everything else. So, I'm going to pick it up. Unfortunately, it's not available on Steam pre-order right now, but I would like to get it on Steam. If I can't, I'm going to get it on PlayStation 4. And I want to be excited, but especially with all the news about Gundam Breaker, new Gundam Breaker not being quite as good, I'm trepidatious, and I don't want to get too enthusiastic. And it's possible that they'll be making a whole bunch of new mistakes with Soul Calibur 6, but I do think they have learned. One of the things they did a few years ago was release Soul Calibur 2 Remastered, and that goes to show that they saw one game in particular was more popular than just about any other, and they made that a game to re-release. So I think they're looking hard at these games and trying to be very, you know, in tune with what fans want. So that's the most we can ask for. I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.